Christmas Eve should have been the happiest night of the year. Our home in suburban Ohio glowed with festive lights, the front yard covered in a blanket of soft snow that looked like it had been pulled straight from a postcard. Inside, the fireplace crackled, stockings hung in a perfect row, and the long oak table was set with polished silverware that gleamed under the chandelier. For weeks I had poured my energy into creating this one evening of peace and unity, an evening that was supposed to remind us of what family really meant. But deep down, I had a gnawing feeling. And when my sister-in-law, Tiffany, swept through the front door with her usual dramatic entrance, my instincts told me I was right. Tiffany had a reputation. She wasn't just outspoken, she was cruel. A woman who thrived on finding cracks in others and prying them open in front of an audience. She hugged my husband Mark a little too tightly, air-kissed our mother-in-law like a Hollywood starlet, and strutted into the dining room as if the night belonged to her. I stood back, forcing a smile, telling myself to stay calm. Tonight wasn't about her. Tonight was about family, about healing the quiet tension that had simmered in our family for years. The guests trickled in, neighbors, co-workers, cousins. Laughter filled the rooms, wine glasses clinked, and for a while, I allowed myself to breathe. Maybe, just maybe, Tiffany wouldn't ruin Christmas this time. But as soon as we all sat at the long table, I saw the gleam in her eyes. She adjusted her diamond bracelet, leaned forward, and in a voice dripping with venom disguised as charm, she said, "So tell us, Emily, how does it feel to finally sit at a table you didn't pay for?" The words sliced through the room like shattered glass. A silence fell so heavy that even the ticking of the clock on the mantel sounded deafening. My fork slipped from my fingers, clattering against the plate. My throat went dry. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, waiting, watching. My cheeks burned hot. Tiffany had always hinted at my past, about the years when Mark and I struggled financially, when we relied on his family's help to keep our heads above water. But she had never said it this bluntly, not in front of everyone, not with that smug smile, savoring every drop of my humiliation. Mark shot her a warning glance, but he didn't speak. My mother-in-law fidgeted with her napkin, pretending not to hear. The guests shifted uncomfortably, some looking down at their plates, others sneaking glances at me, waiting to see if I'd fight back or crumble. Inside, I screamed. Every insult I'd swallowed over the years, every cutting remark Tiffany had thrown my way, it all boiled up, begging to be released. But the words tangled in my throat. My chest tightened as my silence made Tiffany's victory feel complete. Her smile widened. "Oh, don't be shy, Emily. Everyone here knows the story. Some people just marry into money while others work for it." A few guests forced polite chuckles, trying to diffuse the tension, but the damage was already done. My hands trembled under the table. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. And then, out of nowhere, a chair scraped against the hardwood floor. The sound was sharp, startling, like a thunderclap in the silence. One of the guests, someone I never expected, rose to their feet, their expression fierce, their voice steady. "Tiffany," they said, eyes locked on her with a heat I had never seen before. "You've gone far enough." The room held its breath. Everyone froze, forks suspended midair, wine glasses trembling in hands. For the first time that night, Tiffany's smile faltered. And I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The room was frozen in silence, every pair of eyes shifting between Tiffany and the guest who had just stood up. My pulse hammered in my ears, and for the first time in years, Tiffany looked uncertain. Her glossy smile flickered, her confidence shaken as she tilted her head with mock curiosity. "And what exactly do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice sugary sweet but edged with steel. The man standing was Mr. Harrison, our neighbor from down the street. A retired lawyer with sharp eyes and a reputation for never backing down, even in the smallest of neighborhood disputes. He had always been polite to me, even kind, but we weren't close. I never imagined he'd be the one to defend me, especially in front of my entire family. "I mean," he said, his deep voice cutting through the air like a gavel in a courtroom, "that Emily doesn't deserve to be humiliated in her own home. On Christmas, no less. What kind of person takes joy in tearing someone down at a table meant for love and gratitude?" A murmur rippled across the guests. My husband shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening as though he had been waiting for someone else to say it first. Tiffany's perfectly arched brows rose, her lips curling into a mocking smile. "Oh, come on," she said lightly, waving her manicured hand as if brushing away a speck of dust. "It was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive. Emily knows I don't mean anything by it." But she did. We all knew she did. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the edges of my chair. Inside, I wanted to stand up and scream at her, to finally unleash years of pent-up pain. Yet part of me felt too small, too afraid. I had spent so long letting her words define me that my tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. Mr. Harrison didn't flinch. His gaze stayed locked on Tiffany. "A joke," he repeated. "A joke is supposed to make people laugh together. What you just did wasn't a joke, it was cruelty. And cruelty says a lot more about the person who delivers it than the one it's aimed at." The air shifted. Guests who had been staring at their plates now looked up, emboldened. A few nodded subtly, their silence slowly turning into agreement. Tiffany's smirk faltered further, though she quickly tried to regain control. "Well, isn't this touching?" she sneered. "Our neighbor playing hero. But let's be honest, if Emily can't handle a little teasing, maybe she doesn't belong at this table." My chest clenched. The old shame flared again. And then, something inside me snapped. For years, I had swallowed her barbs, convincing myself it was better to keep the peace, to stay quiet. But as I looked around the table, at the pity in some eyes and the discomfort in others, I realized silence was no longer an option. If I let Tiffany win tonight, she would keep winning forever. My hand trembled as I set my napkin on the table and slowly rose to my feet. My legs felt unsteady, my voice shaky, but my words finally found me. "You think you can keep embarrassing me in front of everyone," I said, my eyes locked on hers. "You think if you humiliate me enough times, I'll disappear. But not tonight. Not in my home. Not on Christmas." The room went dead silent again. Tiffany blinked, caught off guard by my sudden defiance. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, Mr. Harrison nodded toward me, his voice steady and reassuring. "That's the spirit, Emily," he said. "Don't let anyone take your dignity away. Not now. Not ever." The guests began to stir again, murmurs of support, soft claps on the table. For the first time all evening, the power shifted. Tiffany was no longer in control. But even as I stood there, feeling the weight of the moment, I knew one thing. Tiffany wouldn't back down so easily. Her eyes narrowed, and the smirk began to creep back onto her lips. And I realized the real battle hadn't even begun. Tiffany's eyes locked on mine like a predator sizing up its prey. For a moment, the faintest flicker of uncertainty had crossed her face. But now, her smirk was back, sharper than ever. She leaned back in her chair, swirling the wine in her glass with theatrical grace, as if the entire room were her audience, and she had just been challenged to a duel she fully intended to win. Well, she purred, her voice dripping with condescension. "Look at you, Emily. Finally found your voice after all these years. What's next? Are you going to lecture me about morality? Or maybe give us a sob story about how hard your life's been?" A couple of guests shifted uncomfortably. My husband, Mark, stiffened, his hand tightening around his fork. He wanted to defend me. I could see it in the way his jaw clenched. But like so many times before, fear of causing a scene kept him quiet. That silence had always been my prison. Tiffany counted on it. My heart hammered, but I stood straighter. "I don't need to lecture you," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Everyone here sees you for what you are. You don't joke, you humiliate. You don't celebrate family, you tear it apart." The words seemed to hang in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. For a moment, Tiffany's smile wavered again, but then she laughed, a sharp, hollow sound that made the hair on my arms rise. "Oh please," she snapped. "Don't act like some saint. You're just jealous. Jealous that you'll never have what I have. The house, the car, the status. You think these people respect you? They pity you, Emily. And tonight, I just proved it." She turned her gaze to the guests, her manicured hand gesturing dramatically. "Am I wrong? Don't you all see it?" The air shifted again. A couple of guests avoided her eyes. Some glanced nervously at me, others at Tiffany, like they were trapped in the middle of a tug-of-war they didn't want to be part of. My stomach twisted. This was her power. She thrived on dividing people, turning moments of truth into twisted games. For a heartbeat, I faltered. Maybe she was right. Maybe they did pity me. Maybe all my efforts, the decorations, the food, the warm smiles, were nothing but a desperate attempt to prove I belonged. But then, a voice cut through the haze. I don't pity Emily, Mrs. Jensen, an elderly neighbor, said firmly, setting her fork down with a soft clink. Her eyes, gentle but fierce, met mine. I admire her. She's built a home filled with kindness, something no amount of money can buy. You may have luxury, Tiffany, but Emily has respect. And respect isn't earned through cruelty. The table erupted in soft murmurs of agreement. Heads nodded. Shoulders relaxed. A wave of support began to build. Tiffany's face hardened. For the first time, she looked less like the queen of the evening and more like someone cornered. Her lips tightened, and I saw a flash of something. Anger, yes, but also fear. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper that still carried across the table. You think this little moment changes anything? Don't fool yourself, Emily. People may clap for you now, but when the lights fade, you'll still be nothing. Her words stung, but they didn't break me. Not this time. I drew in a shaky breath and spoke clearly, for everyone to hear. Then maybe it's time the lights stop shining on you, Tiffany. Because tonight, everyone finally sees the truth. The guests shifted again, but this time, it wasn't awkwardness. It was energy. It was siding with me. And Tiffany, sensing her grip slipping, narrowed her eyes like a storm cloud ready to burst. I knew she wasn't finished. Not yet. The worst was still to come. The tension was so thick, it felt like the air itself had weight. Tiffany's smirk had hardened into something darker, a mask barely hiding the fury simmering beneath. I knew that look. She wasn't going to back down. No, she was winding up for something bigger, something designed to cut deeper than anything she had said before. She set down her wine glass with deliberate slowness, the sound of crystal against wood echoing like a warning bell. Her eyes locked on me, sharp and merciless. You want to play brave, Emily? She said, her voice low but carrying easily across the table. Fine, but let's not pretend you're the picture of honesty. Should I tell them, or would you like the honor? My stomach dropped. The room went eerily silent again. Even the fire in the hearth seemed to hush, as if the entire house were holding its breath. What are you talking about? I asked, though my voice was quieter than I wanted. Tiffany leaned forward, resting her chin on her perfectly manicured hand. Oh, don't act clueless. You think you can hide your little financial troubles? Your secrets? Maybe you fooled Mark. Maybe even a few of these people, but not me. I know what you've done. My pulse pounded so hard I thought I might faint. A cold sweat prickled at the back of my neck. Tiffany didn't know the full story. She couldn't. But she knew enough to twist the truth into something poisonous. I felt every eye turn to me. My mother-in-law fidgeted with her napkin again, refusing to meet my gaze. Mark stiffened, his hand twitching as if he wanted to reach for mine, but was too frozen to move. Tell us, Emily. Tiffany pressed, her voice sweetly venomous. How much of this little perfect Christmas did you put on credit? How much debt are you drowning in while pretending you've got it all together? The words hit me like a slap. My throat tightened, my cheeks burned. Yes, we had debt. Yes, I had maxed out more than one card to make this Christmas shine, to make it special. But hearing it dragged out under the glow of the chandelier, in front of everyone, it was like being stripped bare. A ripple of murmurs moved across the table. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and vanish. Tiffany smiled wider, sensing her victory. But then, something unexpected happened. Mark finally spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried with the force of a man who had been silent for too long. That's enough, Tiffany. Every head turned. Mark's hand finally reached across the table, covering mine. His grip was firm, grounding me, pulling me back from the edge. Yes, we've had struggles. Everyone does. But you know what? My wife never gave up. She kept this family together when I couldn't. She's the reason this house is filled with warmth tonight. So if you want to humiliate her, you'll have to humiliate me too. The words landed like a hammer. A stunned silence filled the room. Tiffany's smirk faltered, her confidence cracking. Mrs. Jensen, the elderly neighbor, nodded firmly. Debt doesn't define a person. Character does. And Emily's character outshines anything you'll ever try to tarnish. Others around the table began to nod, voices murmuring agreement. The tide was shifting again. But Tiffany wasn't done. She laughed sharply, bitterness spilling into the sound. Touching speech, Mark. Truly. But words don't pay bills. And when reality catches up to you too, don't expect sympathy from me. Her words hung in the air like smoke. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, I wasn't alone. Mark had spoken. Others were rising. And Tiffany was losing her grip. Still, as her eyes narrowed into a cold, dangerous glare, I knew one thing. She would strike again. And when she did, it might be with something far worse than words. Tiffany's glare was razor-sharp, her composure barely holding together. I could almost see the calculation behind her eyes, like a chess player plotting her next cruel move. She leaned back in her chair, lips curling into that smug half-smile that had haunted me for years. "You really want to play this game, Emily?" she asked, her tone icy. "Fine. If the debt isn't enough, maybe I should remind everyone about your little history. After all, people deserve to know who they're sharing dinner with, don't they?" My breath caught. My chest tightened. I knew what was coming before she even said it. "Tell me," Tiffany went on, her voice pitched louder, meant for everyone to hear. "How's that old job of yours?" "Oh wait, that's right. You couldn't even keep it. Fired, wasn't it? Something about mismanaging funds?" The words sliced through me. My knees nearly buckled beneath the table. Yes, years ago, I had lost my job. A corporate downsizing wrapped in whispers and blame. I had worked harder than anyone, but in the end, it was my name on the list. Tiffany knew enough to twist it into something far darker, something it never was. Gasps echoed around the table. My mother-in-law's eyes widened. A cousin shifted uncomfortably, whispering something under his breath. The shame flooded back, fresh and raw, as if I were living it all over again. "That's not true," I managed, though my voice trembled. "I wasn't fired for that." Tiffany cut me off with a mocking laugh. "Oh, please. Stop pretending. We all know your perfect little act is nothing but smoke and mirrors. You've built this entire life on lies, Emily. And deep down, you know it." Her words stung like acid, burning through every layer of strength I had tried to build tonight. My throat tightened, tears threatening at the corners of my eyes. For years I had buried that humiliation, convinced myself it didn't define me. And now Tiffany had dragged it out, stripped me of my dignity in front of everyone I loved. But then, something remarkable happened. Mr. Harrison, still standing tall beside the table, slammed his hand against the wood with a force that made the silverware rattle. "Enough," he barked. His voice thundered with authority, silencing the room. "This has gone far beyond family teasing. This is character assassination, and it's ugly. Emily's past isn't your weapon, Tiffany. And frankly, you should be ashamed." The words ignited something in the room. Mrs. Jensen spoke up again, her voice steady and clear. "Emily has shown nothing but kindness to this community. She's the one who checks on me after storms, who organizes meals when someone is sick. What have you ever done for anyone but yourself?" A neighbor across the table chimed in. "She's right. Emily's always been there for people. Always. I can't say the same about you, Tiffany." The murmurs grew louder, stronger, like a tide turning. Guests who had sat in silence now found their courage, voices rising in Emily's defense. Mark stood too, his voice trembling with emotion but firm with resolve. "Emily doesn't deserve this. She's endured years of your cruelty, Tiffany, and I've been guilty of staying quiet. But not tonight. I won't let you tear her apart anymore." The table erupted, not in chaos, but in support. Nods, murmurs, even claps of agreement. The power Tiffany had held over the room was slipping like sand through her fingers. Her face flushed with anger, her smile gone, replaced by a mask of fury. For the first time, she looked small, cornered, her venom losing its sting. But I knew her. Tiffany wasn't the kind of woman to go down without one final strike. Her eyes darted across the room, searching, scheming. And in that moment, I realized, whatever came next, it would either break me completely or set me free forever. Tiffany's eyes darted from face to face, her smirk gone, her carefully crafted armor cracking under the weight of the room's disapproval. For the first time that night, she looked rattled, but Tiffany wasn't the kind of person to retreat quietly. No, if she was going down, she'd drag someone with her. And in her sights, it was me. She took a slow sip of wine, her hands trembling just enough for me to notice. When she set the glass down, her smile returned, cold, sharp, and dangerous. All right, she said, her voice dripping with venomous calm. If you all want to paint Emily as some saint, then go ahead. But maybe you should know the whole truth before you crown her your Christmas angel. A hush fell across the table. My chest tightened, my instincts screaming that something worse was coming. Tiffany leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine, enjoying the suspense she was building. Tell them, Emily, she purred. Tell them how you almost ruined this family years ago. Or should I? My blood ran cold. My hands gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. Don't, I whispered, my voice barely audible. But Tiffany wasn't listening. She never listened. She wanted blood. Fine, then I'll do it, she continued, raising her voice so every guest could hear. You see, our darling Emily here once took money, not just from her old company, but from this very family. Isn't that right? Thousands of dollars gone. And if it weren't for Mark quietly cleaning up her mess, none of you would even be sitting in this house tonight. Gasps erupted around the table. Heads whipped toward me, eyes wide with shock. My mother-in-law stiffened, her lips pressed tightly together as if she had just swallowed glass. That's a lie. I choked out, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. That's not what happened. Oh, please, Tiffany sneered, her voice rising. Don't deny it now. You think you can keep playing innocent? You almost bankrupted your own husband. And this, she waved her hand around the decorated dining room, is all just a performance to hide it. She doesn't deserve your sympathy. She deserves your pity. The room buzzed with whispers, disbelief hanging in the air like smoke. My throat burned, tears threatening to spill. It was true that years ago, Mark had helped me through a financial disaster, but Tiffany twisted it, made it sound like betrayal instead of desperation. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. I thought I might shatter completely, right there under the chandelier. And then, Mark's voice cut through the storm. That's enough, Tiffany, he roared, slamming his fist against the table so hard the glasses trembled. His face was flushed, his eyes blazing with fury I had never seen in him before. Yes, Emily made mistakes. Yes, we went through hell. But she owned them. She fought for this family when most people would have walked away. Do you hear me? She fought. And I'd rather have a woman who fights beside me than someone who tears people down for sport. The guests erupted, not with whispers, but with applause. Claps, nods, voices rising in agreement. The tide turned completely. Tiffany sat frozen, her face pale beneath her makeup, her lips trembling with rage. She hadn't expected Mark to finally speak with such fire. She hadn't expected anyone to stand with me. And now, for the first time in years, she had no control. I looked around the table, at the neighbors, the family, even my mother-in-law, who now stared at Tiffany with disapproval instead of silent support. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel weak. I felt strong. But Tiffany wasn't finished. Not yet. The storm in her eyes told me she had one last card to play. And whatever it was, it would change everything. Tiffany's face had gone pale, but her eyes still burned with defiance. I could almost see the battle raging inside her. Retreat and let the night slip away from her control, or launch one final, devastating blow. And knowing Tiffany, there was only ever one choice. She leaned forward, resting both elbows on the table, her nails tapping against the wood in an eerie rhythm. The room had gone quiet again, the guests sensing something terrible was about to happen. Even the children, who had been whispering and giggling moments before, now sat frozen, their eyes wide. You all think you've seen the real Emily, Tiffany began, her voice low but sharp, like a knife dragged slowly across glass. The devoted wife, the doting hostess, the woman who overcame so many struggles. But let me tell you something, her biggest secret hasn't even come out yet. A murmur rippled across the table. My heart plummeted into my stomach. I knew what she was about to say. I had prayed she would never dare speak it aloud. But of course, Tiffany thrived on destruction. She turned to Mark, her smile wicked. Tell me, brother, how did it feel when Emily kept something from you? When she wasn't honest about? Don't, I whispered, my voice breaking. But Tiffany's voice rose higher, drowning mine out. About the fact that she almost left you once? That while you were drowning in bills and working night and day, she was ready to walk out the door with someone else. The words detonated like a bomb. The table gasped collectively, voices overlapping in shock. I felt my world tilt, the room spinning around me. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes as every head turned my way. It wasn't the full truth. Yes, years ago, at my lowest, when I felt hopeless, trapped in a marriage consumed by stress, I had considered leaving. I had confided in a friend, maybe too much, maybe in ways that looked suspicious. But I hadn't left. I had stayed. I had fought. I had chosen Mark. But now Tiffany had weaponized my darkest moment and flung it into the open like dirty laundry. Mark's face was stricken, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on me. For a terrifying moment, I thought he believed her version. That all the progress we had made, all the love we had rebuilt, would unravel right there at the Christmas table. Tiffany, I croaked, my voice shaking. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, don't I? She snapped back. Maybe you didn't run off, but you thought about it. You wanted out. And if that's not betrayal, I don't know what is. The whispers grew louder, an uneasy buzz swirling around the room. My cheeks burned, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Shame clung to me like chains, heavy and unrelenting. But then, Mark spoke. His voice was quiet, but steady. Is it true, Emily? The room held its breath. All eyes on me. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I nodded faintly. I thought about it. I admitted, my voice trembling but honest. Years ago, when everything felt impossible, I was scared. I was lost. But I didn't leave, Mark. I stayed. I chose us. And every single day since then, I've been fighting for us. The silence stretched on, unbearable. Tiffany leaned back, satisfied, her smirk returning as though she had finally destroyed me. But then Mark did something none of us expected. He reached across the table, cupped my trembling hand, and squeezed. And I chose you, he said firmly. His voice broke, but his eyes were unwavering. Even at our lowest, I knew you were worth it. I'm not ashamed of our struggles. They made us who we are. The room erupted, not in whispers, but in applause. Genuine, loud, heartfelt applause. Neighbors clapped. Friends nodded. Even Mark's mother, who had been silent the entire night, wiped her eyes and whispered, "That's love." Tiffany froze. The satisfaction drained from her face, replaced by disbelief. She had thrown her deadliest weapon, and it had failed. I sat there, tears streaming, my hand locked in Mark's, my heart finally feeling something it hadn't in years, freedom. But even as the applause rang out, Tiffany's expression hardened again. She wasn't finished, and the storm was far from over. The applause around the table was thunderous compared to the silence that had dominated the night just moments earlier. It was like the sound itself had broken a curse that had hovered over me for years. For the first time, the power Tiffany held was gone, not just slipping, but shattered. But Tiffany wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. Her face flushed crimson, her jaw clenched tight enough to crack. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood with a shriek that made everyone flinch. "Enough," she snapped, her voice sharp and venomous. "You're all fools if you can't see through her act. She's manipulating you, every last one of you." The room fell silent again, but this silence was different. It wasn't tense with fear. It was heavy with judgment, directed at Tiffany, not me. Mr. Harrison crossed his arms, his expression stern. "No, Tiffany. We see clearly now. And what we see is a woman who can't stand not being the center of attention." Murmurs of agreement rippled across the table. Tiffany's eyes darted frantically, searching for even a single ally. Her gaze landed on Mark's mother, who had always been careful to avoid conflict, to keep the peace at any cost. "Mother," Tiffany hissed, Tell them what Emily's really like. You know the truth." All eyes turned toward my mother-in-law. She sat stiffly, her hands clasped in her lap, her face pale. For a moment, I feared she might side with Tiffany. After all, she had often stayed silent when I was attacked before. But then, she shook her head slowly. "No, Tiffany," she said softly, but firmly enough for everyone to hear. "I've watched you tear Emily down for years, and I've said nothing. That was my mistake. But tonight I see who you truly are, and I won't defend it anymore." Gasps rippled through the guests. Tiffany's face twisted, her composure crumbling. "You're taking her side?" she spat. "After everything I've done for this family? After everything she's taken from us?" "Enough," Mark's mother said again, this time louder, her voice shaking but resolute. "This isn't about what Emily took. It's about what she gave. She gave us stability. She gave us love. She gave us nights like this, even when she had nothing left to give. What have you given us, Tiffany? Gossip? Bitterness? Shame? Tiffany's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time, she looked small. Truly small. The guests began murmuring again, but this time the voices weren't whispers. They were sharp, direct, filled with condemnation. She's gone too far. It's cruel. Not even family should behave like that. And then came the moment Tiffany couldn't control. Someone at the far end of the table, Mark's cousin, stood and said loudly, "If you hate being here so much, Tiffany, then leave. No one's stopping you." Others nodded in agreement. A few guests even pushed their chairs back slightly, as though preparing to stand against her if she kept lashing out. Tiffany's eyes widened, her control slipping through her fingers like sand. She slammed her palms against the table, rattling the silverware, her voice breaking into a furious shriek. "Fine. If that's how you all feel, then you can rot in this fake little fairy tale she's built. I don't need any of you." And with that, she grabbed her coat from the back of her chair and stormed toward the door, her heels clicking violently against the floor. The sound echoed like thunder in the stunned silence that followed. The door slammed behind her, rattling the walls, leaving only the crackle of the fire and the heavy breathing of those still seated. For a long moment, no one moved. We all just sat there, stunned, absorbing what had just happened. My heart pounded in my chest, not from fear anymore, but from relief. For the first time in years, Tiffany was gone, and I was still standing. The slam of the front door echoed through the house like the final note of a song that had gone on too long. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The only sound was the soft crackle of the fireplace and the faint tinkling of silverware still trembling on the table from Tiffany's violent exit. I sat frozen, my breath shallow, my hands still gripping the edge of the table as though letting go might undo everything that had just happened. My chest rose and fell rapidly, the adrenaline still coursing through me like a storm. And then, slowly, the tension began to ease. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and sat down, folding his hands in front of him. His eyes softened as he looked at me. "Emily," he said, his voice calm and steady now. "You've endured something tonight no one should ever endure. But you faced it with courage. More courage than most people could have mustered." His words unlocked something inside me. My eyes burned, and before I could stop them, tears spilled down my cheeks. Not the hot tears of shame Tiffany used to provoke, but tears of release. Mrs. Jensen reached across the table, patting my hand gently. "She's gone, dear, and she can't hurt you anymore. Not tonight." The murmurs around the table grew warmer, voices rising in comfort rather than judgment. A cousin leaned forward. "I'll be honest, Emily, I never knew how bad it was for you. But watching you stand up to her, it was inspiring." Others nodded, their faces filled with something I hadn't expected to see: respect. For so long, I had been the quiet one, the peacemaker, the woman Tiffany could use as her favorite target. And yet, tonight, the script had flipped. Mark's hand was still wrapped around mine, his thumb brushing gently against my skin. I turned to him, my vision blurred with tears. His face was solemn but full of pride. "I should have spoken up sooner," he whispered. "I let you fight battles alone that I should have fought with you. But I promise you, Emily, never again." I swallowed hard, nodding, unable to find words. It felt like a crack had finally opened in the wall that had stood between us for years, and through it came light. Mark's mother cleared her throat, her voice trembling. "Emily," she said softly, "I owe you an apology. I stayed silent too many times when I should have defended you. I thought keeping peace meant staying quiet. But tonight, I realized silence only gives cruelty more power." She blinked back tears of her own. "I don't know if you'll forgive me, but I want you to know, I see you now. Truly see you." The weight of her words pressed against me, but instead of crushing me, it lifted me. For so long, I had yearned for that recognition. To hear her admit what I had felt every Christmas, every family gathering, every biting remark Tiffany had thrown like daggers. "I forgive you," I whispered, my voice breaking. I just want peace. For all of us." For the first time that night, genuine laughter bubbled around the table, soft, hesitant, but real. Someone lifted their glass. "To peace," they said. "To peace," the others echoed, raising their glasses high. As the clinking of crystal filled the room, I leaned back in my chair, the tension in my body slowly unraveling. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider in my own family. I felt included, respected, heard. But even as warmth began to return to the night, a part of me couldn't shake the gnawing unease. Tiffany was gone, yes, but Tiffany was also relentless. And if I knew anything about her, it was that storms don't disappear quietly into the night. Somewhere out there, I knew she was plotting her next move. And when she came back, because Tiffany always came back, I had to be ready. For the first time in years, the house felt alive in a way I had only dreamed of. Laughter rose softly again. Conversations resumed in cautious waves, and the tension that had suffocated the evening began to lift. Guests complimented the food, children whispered and giggled from the living room. And for one fleeting moment, Christmas felt like Christmas again. I allowed myself to breathe, to believe, to imagine that maybe, just maybe, the storm was truly over. But then, 3 sharp knocks rattled the front door. The sound froze the room instantly. Glasses hovered halfway to lips. Forks paused midair. My heart lurched into my throat. Mark's face hardened. He knew as well as I did. Storms don't vanish that easily. Before anyone could move, the door swung open with a violent force that made the wreath crash to the floor. And there she was, Tiffany. Her hair, once perfectly styled, now clung wildly to her face. Her makeup was smudged, her cheeks flushed with fury. She looked less like the polished socialite who had entered hours ago, and more like a storm given human form. "You think you can humiliate me?" she spat, her voice raw and trembling with rage. "You think you can all sit here, applauding her like some saint, while you treat me like the villain? No, no, I won't allow it." Gasps erupted. A few guests stood, their chairs scraping against the hardwood. Mark's cousin muttered under his breath, "You've got to be kidding me." But Tiffany wasn't finished. She stormed into the dining room, her heels clattering against the floor like gunshots. Her eyes burned into me, and I felt the air thicken again. The fragile peace shattered in seconds. "You all want the truth?" she shouted, spinning to face the guests. "Fine, I'll give it to you. You think Emily's so perfect? She's nothing but a fraud, and I can prove it." She yanked something from her purse, a folder, thick with papers. My stomach dropped. I knew what it was before she even waved it in the air. Old bills, bank statements, records of debts and late payments I had fought for years to bury. Proof of the struggles I had worked so hard to rise above. Proof of every mistake, every failure. The guests gasped as she slapped the papers onto the table, scattering them like confetti of shame. "See?" she hissed. "This is who you're clapping for. A liar. A leech. A woman who pretends to be strong but hides behind everyone else's money." The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, some in shock, others in protest. My heart hammered as I stared at the papers, the ghosts of my past laid bare under the glow of the chandelier. For a moment, I thought I would break. That Tiffany had finally won. That all the respect I had gained tonight would dissolve like mist. But then Mark stood again. His voice, strong and unwavering, cut through the noise. "Stop it, Tiffany," he thundered. "Yes, those are our struggles. They're real. They're messy, but they're ours. And you think you're exposing Emily? No, you're exposing yourself. Because only a cruel, heartless person would weaponize someone's pain at Christmas." He gathered the scattered papers in one swift motion and hurled them into the fireplace. Flames crackled as the pages curled, blackened, and turned to ash. The guests erupted, not in chaos this time, but in cheers. Applause thundered louder than ever, echoing through the house. Some stood, clapping, voices rising in unison against Tiffany. "Get out," someone shouted. "You've done enough," another added. Tiffany's face twisted in rage, her body trembling. She looked around the room, but this time, there was no ally, no silent approval, no fearful glances. Only walls of disapproval pressing in on her from every side. "You'll regret this," she snarled, her voice cracking. "All of you." And with that, she turned on her heel and stormed out once more, the slam of the door rattling the windows. But this time, no one chased her. No one pitied her. This time, she was truly alone. The door slammed so hard the wreath hook clattered to the floor a second time. This time, however, no one rushed to pick it up. No one rushed to smooth things over. We all just sat there, staring at one another in stunned silence. The echo of Tiffany's words, "You'll regret this," still hanging in the air like smoke. For the first time all night, my hands weren't trembling. My body wasn't frozen. I felt light, almost weightless, as if someone had finally lifted a burden I had been carrying for years. But beneath that relief, a knot of unease pulsed in my stomach. Tiffany's threats were never empty. Mark broke the silence first. He wrapped his arm around me and kissed the side of my head, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. "She's gone. For good this time." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to cling to the warmth of his words, to the comfort of his arms. But Tiffany's voice echoed in my head, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't finished. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, bringing everyone's attention back to the table. "I think it needs to be said," he began, his voice calm but firm, "that what happened tonight wasn't just a family squabble. It was abuse. And Emily," he looked directly at me, his eyes kind, "you've endured it with more dignity than most people could, but you should never have had to endure it at all." The table murmured in agreement. My cheeks flushed, not with shame this time, but with something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Validation. Mrs. Jensen raised her glass. "To Emily," she said warmly, her voice steady despite the tears glistening in her eyes. "For her strength, her kindness, and for finally showing all of us what true grace looks like." "To Emily," echoed around the table as glasses lifted high. My chest tightened, and this time, when tears filled my eyes, I didn't fight them. They weren't tears of humiliation. They were tears of relief. Mark squeezed my hand. "I should have defended you sooner," he said quietly, his voice heavy with guilt. "I let her get away with too much for too long. But I promise you, Emily, that ends tonight." I nodded, my heart aching with both love and sorrow. "It's not just your fault," I whispered back. "I let her silence me. I thought keeping the peace was more important than standing up for myself. But not anymore." Across the table, Mark's mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. "Emily," she said softly, her voice shaking, "you've given this family more than I ever admitted. And I'm sorry for the times I let Tiffany's cruelty go unchecked. You deserve my defense long before tonight." Her words nearly undid me. For years, her silence had cut almost as deep as Tiffany's insults. To hear her finally speak, to hear her take my side, was like a wound beginning to heal. "It's okay," I said, my voice cracking. "I don't want blame. I just want peace. For all of us." The guests nodded, the air in the room warm again, the weight of Tiffany's presence finally lifting. Conversations resumed in softer tones. Laughter slowly returned, and the children in the living room squealed with delight as they discovered another hidden plate of cookies. For the first time, I felt like I belonged. Not tolerated, not pitted, belonged. But as I looked around the table, my eyes landing on the charred remains of Tiffany's evidence still smoldering in the fireplace, unease crept back in. Because Tiffany's final words weren't just noise. They were a promise. And I knew, deep in my gut, that she wasn't finished with me. Not yet. The morning after Christmas should have been calm. The kind of morning where the house smelled of cinnamon rolls, where kids played with their new toys in pajamas, and where laughter replaced the chaos of the night before. But that wasn't what I woke up to. Instead, I awoke to the buzz of my phone on the nightstand. Dozens of messages, notifications, and missed calls flashed across the screen like a warning siren. My stomach dropped as I opened the first one. "Is it true what Tiffany posted?" Another. "I can't believe she would say that about you." My fingers trembled as I opened social media. And there it was. Tiffany's venom had found a new stage. She had posted pictures of old bills, screenshots of debt collectors' letters, and a long, scathing caption that painted me as a fraud. "Last night, my family applauded a liar," she wrote. "Emily has built her life on lies and manipulation. Don't be fooled by her fake smile." The post had already gained traction. Comments poured in, some defending me, others repeating Tiffany's poison. My chest tightened as shame clawed at me all over again. She had taken our private pain and broadcast it to the world. Mark sat beside me, his arm slipping protectively around my shoulders as he read the post. His jaw clenched. "She's trying to destroy you," he muttered. "Destroy us. But we won't let her." Tears blurred my vision. "She's already started, Mark. Look, people are talking. Everyone we know will see this." Just then, the phone buzzed with another message. It was from Mrs. Jensen. "Don't let her win. People see the truth." A second message came from Mr. Harrison. If she wants a fight, she's picked the wrong community. We'll stand with you. And then another, from a neighbor I barely knew. We're behind you, Emily. Don't let Tiffany's lies get in your head. For every cruel comment online, there were messages of support flooding in. People who had seen Tiffany's cruelty firsthand weren't fooled. They were angry, and they were rallying around me. But even as hope flickered, I knew Tiffany wouldn't stop here. She was relentless. The social media post was only her first move. Mark looked me in the eyes, his voice steady and fierce. We fight back, not by stooping to her level, but by showing who we really are. We've got nothing to hide, Emily. And maybe it's time people see the truth from us, not from her twisted version. I swallowed hard, nodding. My instinct had always been to stay quiet, to hide, to hope storms would pass. But Tiffany wasn't a storm you waited out. She was a hurricane that grew stronger the more silence she was fed. That afternoon, we gathered with a few close friends and neighbors. Mr. Harrison, Mrs. Jensen, even Mark's cousin. They all came over, bringing food, warmth, and solidarity. You don't have to face her alone, Mr. Harrison told me. Bullies lose their power when they're exposed. I sat there, surrounded by people who believed in me, people who had seen me for who I truly was, and I felt something shift inside me. A spark of courage. A fire I hadn't let myself feel in years. Tiffany wanted to destroy me with lies. But maybe the truth was stronger. Still, as night fell and the glow of Christmas lights reflected against the snow outside, I couldn't shake the echo of Tiffany's words. You'll regret this. Because if I knew her, and I did, this was only the beginning. The days after Christmas blurred together in a haze of tension. What should have been a quiet week of leftovers, laughter, and board games turned into a storm of whispers, screenshots, and side glances. Everywhere I went, I felt it, that shadow of Tiffany's poison. At the grocery store, two women by the produce section went quiet the moment I walked past, their eyes flicking toward me, then away. At the coffee shop, a barista I'd known for years avoided small talk, sliding my cup across the counter without a word. Tiffany's social media posts had done their job, but she wasn't stopping there. On the third day, Mark came home from work with a grim look on his face. She called my office, he said flatly. Told them you were a financial liability. Tried to paint you as someone who could drag down the company's reputation. My stomach twisted. She actually did that? He nodded. The manager laughed it off. He knows you. But Emily, this isn't just pettiness anymore. She's trying to burn everything down around you. That night, another blow landed. A neighbor stopped by with a worried expression. Emily, she said gently, I thought you should know. Tiffany's been going door to door, telling people you scammed her out of money. Most of us don't believe it, but you should be aware. I sat on the couch after she left, staring blankly at the twinkling Christmas tree lights. My chest ached, my breath shallow. Every time I thought Tiffany couldn't sink lower, she proved me wrong. Mark sat beside me, gripping my hand. She wants you broken, but you're stronger than she realizes. I don't feel strong, I whispered. I feel exhausted. Like every piece of my life is under attack. Mr. Harrison stopped by the next morning, a stern look on his face. Emily, I've seen people like her before. Bullies with too much time and too little heart. She thrives because people are afraid to speak up. But you're not alone anymore. You've got a community that's ready to stand with you. His words lit a small flame inside me. Maybe he was right. For years, Tiffany's strength had been my silence. Every insult I let slide, every humiliation I swallowed, it all gave her more power. But now she had exposed herself. Everyone had seen her cruelty at Christmas dinner. And maybe it was time I stopped hiding from the truth of who I was. That afternoon, I opened my laptop. My hands trembled as I typed. But with every word, my resolve grew stronger. I wrote a post. Not defensive, not angry, just honest. I shared my story, our struggles with debt, my mistakes, the times I had almost broken under the weight of it all. But I also shared how I had fought back, how I had built a home filled with love despite the storms, and how I refused to let cruelty define me. When I hit post, my chest tightened with fear. But within minutes, comments began pouring in. You're stronger than she'll ever be. Proud of you for speaking your truth. This is what resilience looks like. The flame inside me grew into a fire. For the first time, Tiffany wasn't controlling the story. I was. Still, I knew her, and I knew she wouldn't let this go unanswered. Somewhere out there, Tiffany was reading every word and planning her next move. And when it came, I had to be ready, not just to survive it, but to end this war once and for all. The new year had barely begun when Tiffany made her move. For days, her silence had been almost more unnerving than her constant attacks. No posts, no gossip, no phone calls to stir chaos. Just silence. And in that silence, a part of me dared to hope that maybe she had finally given up. But Tiffany never gave up. It happened at the community center during the annual New Year's brunch. The room was packed with neighbors, co-workers, and friends, the very people Tiffany had been poisoning with her lies. Mark and I had gone reluctantly, encouraged by Mr. Harrison and Mrs. Jensen, who both insisted we couldn't let Tiffany's shadow keep us hiding at home. At first, everything felt normal. People smiled, greeted us warmly, and even congratulated me on my honest post from days earlier. For the first time in months, I felt like the ground beneath me was steady. And then Tiffany walked in. She was dressed to kill, hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, a red dress that commanded every eye in the room. Her heels clicked against the polished floor like a warning. The air shifted instantly. Conversations quieted. Everyone knew the storm had arrived. She didn't waste time. She marched straight to the front of the room, grabbed the microphone from the podium, and turned to face the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice dripping with false charm. "I think it's time you all heard the truth about Emily. Because while she's busy playing the victim, there's more you need to know." A ripple of unease spread through the crowd. My heart pounded. Tiffany's eyes locked on me like a predator. "Emily has been lying to all of you. Not just about her finances, but about her integrity. She nearly destroyed her marriage, and she nearly destroyed this family. And if you all continue to trust her, she'll only drag you down too." Gasps echoed. A few people whispered, unsure. My cheeks burned as every eye turned toward me. For a split second, the old fear returned. The desire to run, to hide, to let her words define me again. But then I stood. My legs shook, my palms were damp, but my voice was steady. "Enough, Tiffany." The room fell silent. I walked forward, every step fueled by the fire that had been growing in me since Christmas night. "You've tried to humiliate me in front of my family. You've dragged my past into the light. You've spread lies, twisted truths, and tried to turn this community against me. But here's the truth. I'm still standing. And the only person exposed here is you." Tiffany's face twisted, but I pressed on. "Yes, I've struggled. Yes, I've made mistakes. But those struggles made me stronger. And unlike you, Tiffany, I don't tear people down to feel powerful. I build people up. I create a home filled with love, not bitterness. And that's something you'll never understand." The crowd erupted in applause. Genuine, thunderous applause. People stood, clapping, nodding, voices rising in support. Tiffany's eyes widened, her mask cracking. She tried to speak, but the cheers drowned her out. She looked around desperately, but there were no allies left. No whispers of agreement. Only condemnation. Mrs. Jensen stepped forward, her voice clear and firm. "We've all seen enough, Tiffany. You've embarrassed yourself long enough. It's time you leave Emily alone." Others echoed her words. "Enough. Leave her be. We're done with this." Tiffany's face flushed crimson. Her lips trembled with rage, but no words came. She dropped the microphone with a sharp clatter and stormed out of the room, her heels clicking furiously against the floor. This time, the door closed softly behind her. No slam, no drama. Just an ending. I stood there, my chest heaving, my eyes wet with tears. And for the first time, I knew the war was over. The weeks that followed felt strangely quiet, almost surreal. After years of living in Tiffany's shadow, waiting for the next cutting remark, the next humiliating jab, the next storm, I found myself waking up to silence. A silence that was no longer suffocating, but liberating. Tiffany didn't call. She didn't post. She didn't show up at our door. Word spread that she had moved in with a friend 2 towns over, retreating from the very community she had once strutted through like royalty. For the first time in as long as I could remember, her absence wasn't a void, it was a gift. But what lingered even more than her absence was the presence of those who had stood with me. Neighbors stopped by more often, not out of pity, but out of genuine connection. "Mrs. Jensen brought over fresh pies, smiling warmly when she said, "It feels good to visit a home that radiates kindness." Mr. Harrison would wave from his porch, tipping his hat with that approving nod that said more than words ever could. Even my mother-in-law changed. Where once there had been silence, now there was support. She called more often, asking about my day, thanking me for holding the family together during the chaos. The words were small, but they carried the weight of years of unspoken truths finally acknowledged. Mark and I grew closer, too. Something about that night had broken down the wall that years of stress and silence had built between us. We talked more, really talked, about our fears, our dreams, our mistakes. And with every conversation, I felt the cracks in our marriage healing, slowly filling with trust and love. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, we sat by the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa while the kids played with their toys on the rug. Mark squeezed my hand and whispered, "You know, I've never been prouder of you than I was that night." I looked at him, tears stinging my eyes, and whispered back, "I've never been prouder of me, either." Because the truth was, Tiffany hadn't just been my tormentor, she had been my mirror. Every cruel word she hurled, every humiliation she inflicted, had forced me to confront my deepest insecurities. For years, I believed her lies. I believed I was weak, unworthy, a fraud. But now I knew better. I wasn't weak. I was resilient. I wasn't unworthy. I was loved. And I wasn't a fraud. I was a survivor. Christmas would never be the same, but maybe that wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't about the perfect tree or the flawless dinner anymore. It was about the courage to stand tall, even when someone tried to break you down. It was about the family, by blood or by choice, who stood with you when the storm came. And as I watched the flames dance in the fireplace, their glow reflecting in the laughter of my children, I realized something. Tiffany's cruelty had tried to destroy me, but in the end, it had only made me stronger. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. And this time, the story was mine.